Morning, everyone. That's great. So what I thought I would try to do this morning is to illuminate or further elaborate on a teaching that came up during the fall retreat. And that teaching was look for nothing. And this is a kind of pith teaching that I sort of give out to people sometimes if they have really looking hard and have been disillusioned of various other things. And it's always a teaching which seems to confound people somewhat, which is good because that's partly the point. But a pith teaching, I would say, is kind of how do you present the maximum amount of teaching in the minimum amount of words? It's so simple that it's sort of impossible not to understand what's being said on one level. And on another level, it's so simple that it's impossible to do. So it presents a kind of conundrum. And so that's what I want to get into today, is this teaching to look for nothing. Now, where does this teaching come from? Why do say look for nothing? And it comes down to this: the goal, if you will, of the spiritual path, or you might say the truth itself, is not something particular. It's not a thing. You know, many of you I know have heard this message before, but it can't be reiterated enough. It's not a thing that can be grasped. It's not an object. It's not a thought. It's not an idea. It's not a concept. It's not a view of the world or a view of the universe or a view of metaphysics. It's not any sort of view at all. And this is also, I would argue, the primary difficulty and primary obstacle on the spiritual path. And I would characterize that as taking something for nothing. In other words, this comes up in a variety of different ways, the most obvious of which to us all here might be that of conceptualization. In other words, taking a particular concept to be the truth itself, or a view, a model, a cosmology, or a model of the world, taking that to be a view. And I know on my path, this was one of the main mistakes that I made on the beginning of the path, is looking for the right view. That's what I was looking for. I thought the truth must be a view. I'm looking for the right view. What is it? And you look here, you look there, you look there, you trade one view for another, and on and on and on. And you could do that for innumerable lifetimes, so to speak. Another way that this mistake comes up is one maybe some of us don't think about as much, is idolatry. It's essentially the same mistake. In this mistake, you're taking some kind of an object or a concept to be the divine, to be God. And it's essentially the same mistake. And this mistake comes up in egotism as well, which is about the doer. Who is the doer of our actions? Who is the actor in all of this? And if you take it to be the ego, this is another way of taking a concept or, in this case, a subject to be the fundamental ground. So since birth, we have been conditioned to pay attention to things, to think about things, to try to understand things, to manipulate things, to control things in various ways. We're well acquainted with things. So in a sense, it's natural for us to focus on them and natural for us to make this mistake when we set out upon the spiritual path of thinking that the truth itself must be something. It must be some kind of view or some kind of explanation or a thought or a feeling, or a state. So we're well acquainted with things, and the message here, look for nothing, is that what we need to do is to acquaint ourselves with nothing. Because things themselves, we find over time, don't bring any kind of lasting satisfaction. So, and just to show that I'm not completely coming out of left field here, which you probably all know already, but let's go into it a little bit, I want to give some examples of how this core teaching appears in various spiritual traditions, at least traditions that I'm familiar with. I'm well aware they appear in more spiritual traditions, but these are the ones that I'm most familiar with. So many of you may know the 20th century American mystic Franklin Merrill Wolfe basically said that he understood realization to be a realization of nothing, but a nothing which is absolutely substantial. The Hindu mystic Anandamoyama said, look to nothing. It's almost the exact same teaching. Where nothing is, she said, there is everything. The early Christian mystic Dionysius the Areopagite had, in his mystical theology, laid out what he described as the negative method of approaching God, which was to essentially to remove all things, all attributes, all thoughts or concepts about the divine. And by removing, you would approach the divine. He also talked about an appositive method, but he said once you do that, then you have to go backwards. So the medieval Christian mystic Meister Eckhart followed suit, and he advised people on the path to abandon all created things. It's the same message. Another anonymous Christian mystic, the author of The Cloud of Unknowing, giving advice to monks who are entering into the contemplative life, advised them not to be confused by directions of language. People say, heaven is up there, or look over there, or lift your heart up. He said, don't be confused by these directions. Where I really want you to look is nowhere. Because nowhere physically is everywhere spiritually. The same message, almost exactly what Anandamoyama says, only pertaining to places rather than things, but this is essentially the same message. Nisargadatta Maharaj, his teaching was to focus on the I am thought, but not because this thought was itself the truth, but rather by way of elimination, because he said, when you see at last that this too is false, then self-realization will occur. So just consider it. If the very thought of your own existence is itself false, illusory, not true, is there anything that one could hold on to? Ramana talks about the self. Who am I? He says, find the self, be as you are, be the self. He doesn't talk about the self, at least explicitly, in terms of nothing. So you might think, well, at last, here's somebody who's pointing to something, at least, the self. So we can look to that. But if you see what Ramana says about the self, or examine his teachings more deeply, you're going to run into this same kind of dilemma. Because what does he say about the self? He says, there is nothing but the self. So if there is nothing but the self, all things are, and you can check this yourself by thinking about it, but all things are delineated in some fashion by distinction, some kind of distinctions. It's this and not that. We can contrast one thought with another thought, one concept with another concept, one view with another view, one feeling with an opposite feeling, one, and so on and so on and so on. One place with another place. It's all defined by these distinctions. But if there is nothing but this one, what is there to contrast it with? At the very least, we have to say it is not a thing in the normal sense of the word thing. It is not a thing in the normal way that we think about things. You cannot think about it, the self, the way Ramana describes it, in the way that you can think about anything else, because it has no limit. So sometimes people ask me to try to be more precise with my words. And generally I say, no, I can't. It's not worth my trouble. And two, the very request to try to be more precise with the words belies this very mistake. It shows that the person is intellectually trying to grasp onto something. If only I could encapsulate it better in a more precise language, if only I could construct a more precise view, then I'll understand it. But this is not the case. So, yes, words can be used skillfully, but it's not a matter of increasing precision until you get it. You will never find that level of precision in language. Language is inherently ambiguous. And this is one of the things I like about this teaching. To look for nothing is the ambiguity inherent in the instructions. To look for nothing, do you look or not look? And if you do look, what do you possibly look for? In this case, and I would say in the larger body of spiritual teachings, the ambiguity both within a single teaching and within the larger body of teachings across all traditions is a feature of the teaching, not a flaw, not a bug. And in this teaching, to look for nothing, the instruction itself, because of its brevity, because of its ambiguity, and because of where it's pointing, gives the seeker no purchase, no easy conceptual escape, nothing to grasp onto, no particular direction to look, no concept or view to construct or hold on to. It is, in essence, continually erasing itself. And this brings me to what I would say is the most common question that I get in response to this teaching, which goes something like this. I've heard it in a number of different ways, but it's something like this. I don't get it. I don't understand how to look for nothing. Do I try to look hard, or do I just forget about it? Do I just go about my business and forget about it? This is the essential dilemma, and I've heard this dilemma many times by people who have been on the path for a long time in various different guises. Now, there's a number of different answers that could be offered for this type of question. And one of those answers, maybe in some instances the best one, is just silence. Because one's own struggle with this question, what to do. What am I going to do? Do I forget about it? Do I keep trying? Do I look here? Do I look there? Your own frustration and being stuck, being unable to answer this question, unable to follow the instruction, could be the very teaching you need. In other words, it can appear like a Zen koan, in which the only real answer comes from spontaneous clarification. It doesn't come from a view or a concept or figuring out where this nothing is. But it may also be the case that someone out there just needs one more little hint, one more piece of advice on how to look for this nothing, on how to try, and so on. And so I want to try to give a hint or two and try to give a few further directions. So this is the hint. It's kind of circuitous, so bear with me, because it comes by way of a story. And it's a story of my own practice, a story of my own training, a teaching that I received. And so I was at this training seminar once for a weekend. It was like a 3-day seminar. And the first day, this was the first thing that we did, the first set of exercises or practices was, how to describe this? You lay on the ground and you inhale and then exhale until you have kind of just neutral pressure inside and outside, and then you stop breathing. So essentially you hold your breath with neutral pressure. Hold your breath for as long as you possibly can. And when you can no longer hold your breath, you can start breathing. But when you start breathing, you have to start doing push-ups. So you roll over and you start doing the push-ups. Now, and while you're doing the push-ups, you can breathe as much as you want, enjoy breathing and do those push-ups for as long as you possibly can. You can stop at any time that you want as well. But when you stop doing push-ups, you have to stop breathing again. So you stop doing push-ups, you roll over, and you hold your breath. And you do that for as long. This went on for 20 minutes. We were instructed just do that for 20 minutes. If you're breathing, you're doing push-ups. If you're not doing push-ups, you're holding your breath. After 20 minutes, we went on and did it with sit-ups, then squats. Then I think the last one was when you're holding your breath, you're also jogging. And then when you start breathing, you can do any of the 3 exercises as long as you're doing exercise, whatever it feels like is going to help the most. So this is the basic drill. And also I would say a kind of very pithy teaching that I got because this puts you in a very interesting conundrum. It's very different than just doing push-ups or just holding your breath. And so I want to suggest that this question regarding look for nothing of do I try to look hard or do I just forget about it is like asking, do you want to do push-ups or do you want to hold your breath? So you can walk away and forget about it, but how long can you really forget about reality? How long can you forget about your own being? How long can you forget about your deepest longing? And you can try and try and try. And still never be able to make it happen, never be able to do it yourself on your own. So I want to talk about a little bit the mind state that this puts you in, this push-ups, holding your breath, is if you just do push-ups, many of you have probably done push-ups or some other kind of exercise. If you're just doing that, like I'm going to do 10 push-ups or 20 push-ups, you will have the luxury of being able to keep yourself separate from those push-ups and on some level in conflict with them. Because you know that you can stop at the end and rest and and take it easy and recover from the push-ups. And the same is true with holding your breath. If you just hold your breath, you're like, okay, I'm going to hold my breath for as long as I can. You know at the end you can just forget about it and rest and breathe all you want. But if you give yourself no escape, if what you are doing, if the path is both to hold your breath and to do the push-ups, and there's no point at which you can stop and forget about it and recover from it, and so on, something very interesting happens. When you do this and give yourself no way out, no escape from the discomfort or from the work, from the exercise, you are, in a sense, forced to start to confront yourself. You can't just wait until it's over. You know, when you do push-ups, you have a kind of aversion to them that builds as you're doing the push-ups more and more and more. And when you hold your breath, there's this desire that builds and builds and builds to breathe, breathe, breathe. And you can go back and forth from this desire, aversion, desire, aversion. There's no escape. You have to start to find a kind of peace within yourself, within what's going on, a kind of comfort within discomfort that you never really imagined before. It pushes you to try to find that something in yourself you never looked at. And it forces you to just be in that moment, just doing push-ups until you can't, and then just holding your breath until you can't, and then just doing push-ups until you stop thinking about the desire and aversion. It becomes irrelevant to the drill. You just do the work. You just keep going. You just walk on, as they say. And this kind of peace is very hard to find when you always give yourself a way out. When you think, well, if this doesn't work out, or if I check this out and I do it for a while and I don't get what I want, I'll just walk away and do something else. And then you'll do that for a while, and if that doesn't work out, you'll walk away from that and do something else. And so on. You always give yourself an escape. Over and over and over. And so this is a way of pointing toward there's no escape. In a way, if you dedicate yourself to any practice, you are doing some version of this. And so, yes, you can shorten the process by upping the intensity, but meditation has this aspect to it. All the different spiritual practices, I would say, have some element of asceticism, which is self-denial. Denying the self what it wants. I want to stop doing jump squats. And so all of our practices have some kind of element of this, and that's why I bring it up, so that you can look for that element and recognize when the mind is trying to find an escape route, when you're trying to get out of it, instead of see it through to the end and see what happens. Yeah, come on up.
So,
thank you.
Yeah. So, my path, I was coming to the center for many, many years, meditating very rigorously, and I had continued to do these practices, but I was I was struggling with grief. And I was always, I would get a practice that said, okay, just be with your grief. So I would try to be with my grief. But just like the push-ups thing, I mean, it's like just like that. Because I would stop. I mean, at some point, I would not be willing to continue. And really, what seemed to work for me, and it's just a process of exhaustion. I just kept seeing that, okay, I run away from the grief. I'm still grieving. I'm still miserable. And so I finally, it just began to sink in that I can't get away from it. Now, this is unusual, I think, my situation, because, I mean, for most Americans, what I was experiencing was every 2 years, I had a major loss of a loved one. And in that process, after 10 years, I was still doing that push-up thing. I was still doing it. And finally, I began to realize I'm never going to get away from this. And it was like, I'm done. Take me. I'm done. And I began to sit for these long periods where I would just feel the grief. And I would, it started out, I would go past my limit. And I would be crying, I would just feel terrible. But I'd go past that. And then at some point, I began to feel a kind of joy. And I couldn't put my finger on it, but I started thinking that, well, it's because I'm sitting with this, I'm allowing it to be there, I'm feeling joy. But as soon as I started to think that, it went away. I couldn't find it again. And so I fell back down into just the misery of being with my pain. And so I just sat with it and sat with it and sat with it and felt the horror. And again, there's some joy. But I'd seen that there's no point in grasping at the joy, so I just continued to sit with it. And really that sort of freed me. Then in my waking life, like when I'd be at work, and I would suddenly feel the grief coming on, like had happened many times. I'd be at work, standing at the nursing station, and I would just suddenly remember something horrifying that had happened, and I would just start feeling queasy and sick to my stomach, and I would fall into that. But this happened then, after having done this practice for a while. I was standing there, and suddenly I felt it, and it was like, oh, this is my friend. And I allowed it to just be there, and I just felt it. And I felt joy. I felt it dissolving away and into a kind of a warmth in my guts, kind of. And then I looked around, and everything looked wonderful. Everything was fine. And so that was a kind of, that was this culmination of realizing there's no escape. There is no escape. And, this is the same with the fear of death. If you're afraid of death, then the problem is that we can easily make a story up about, well, yes, okay, I know I'm going to die, so now I've resolved it. It's like the word infinity. As soon as you think you know what, that distance is that is impossible to attain, you put a name on it.
Yeah, and then you can compartmentalize and
right. It's
file it away.
Right, infinity.
Yeah, of course.
Now I understand. Yeah, but you see, that is how we fool ourselves. That's exactly what you were describing, and as you described it, it became very clear to me that's what you're talking about, and it's interesting. So anyway, I wanted to share that.
This is, thank you so much. Yeah. This is what this is happening in our lives on many, many different levels. That's why I say, just because I'm telling you these crazy stories about these crazy practices I did, I don't expect you to go do these practices. But what you can do is look in your own life and see how something similar is already going on.
Yes. Yes.
And that this, as Todd said, this being exhausted is not necessarily the terrible thing that you think it is. And in fact, one of my teachers, this is another crazy thing, he said, a real training only happens after 200 push-ups, 200 sit-ups, 200 squats. Then you can train. And the whole idea was exhaustion, that you have to be exhausted to really start to train. So if you ever feel disillusioned about the spiritual path or exhausted in your efforts, this is not necessarily something to be afraid of, or go into this exhaustion.
Yeah,
it's a sign of, in a way, a sign of progress. The more exhausted you are, the easier it is to go into situations as nothing.
Yes. So it's a kind of a wordless understanding, and my interpretation of it when this was occurring, it's a wordless understanding that I can never, ever resolve this, that it is out of my hands. And with that realization is the realization I can't escape it. And that is so powerful, not as an idea, but to just in your guts, just to see it and feel it directly. The whole world changed at that point. And that was right before that last retreat that I went on with Joel, in which this awakening took place. So anyway, I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. And I'd like to share something as well, because I think it might illuminate this point even further. And I have this poem I'd like to read to you, which is actually, I wrote the day of my awakening. So this is as close to, a real-time report as one can get. Here it is. It says, there it is. Grasp its tail and it will sprout 10,000 tails. Grab its arm and it will grow 10,000 arms. Fix its gaze and it will open 10,000 eyes. Charge at it and it will recede from you. Run away and it will follow. You cannot escape it. You cannot master it. What more can you do? What more can you do? What else can you do? What is the message here? I would say, if I had to speak it, I would say it's surrender. That's all you can do. If you're looking for more direct advice, I'd like to offer a few things as well. I'll give you 3 different ways in which you can try to apply this teaching. You can try to look for nothing. The first one amounts to this, and I call it the Sherlock Holmes methodology, which is to eliminate all things and try to get a sense of what's left when you eliminate all things. Sherlock Holmes said, when you eliminate every possible solution or whatever is left, however improbable, must be the truth. So eliminate all things. So I think Franklin Merrill Wolff gives very good advice on this in his substantiality is inversely proportional to ponderability. So how do you identify what a thing is? Well, if you can ponder it, if you can think about it, if you can delineate it in any way, it's something. And these things can become more and more subtle, but as long as you can ponder it in some way, it's something. And so this is a good way to check yourself along these. And as you see, oh, that's something, discard them, discard, until you start to get a sense of what's left. in practice, I would say in meditation practice, this takes the shape of you start to look at what's going on, and you first delineate two poles of experience, or two poles of consciousness, which is the objects and the subject. And we usually start with the objects, and then at last you move to the subject. Once you've discarded all the objects, the subject is all that's left. And as Nisargadatta said, focus on this sense of being, this subject. When that too is seen to be impermanent, it comes and goes, you can see it too is just an object appearing before consciousness. And you can discard that as well. Another way of doing this, and this is more like choiceless awareness, is do not let the mind rest on any particular thing, either subject or object. Let the mind move on while you abide in a stillness, in silence. Those ways all fall under this category of eliminating, different ways of eliminating all things and trying to get a sense of what's left. The second way is to look for what is always present. It's kind of the flip version of that. Consider this deeply. In other words, what is the common denominator of all experience? All states, all thoughts, all perceptions, all emotions, as well as the absence of all these. What is always present? What is never absent? It's very hard to get a sense of this because it's always present, we tend to ignore it. It's just like, you could say a fish isn't aware of the water. Because it's the very environment that it lives in. It's everywhere. The third way that you can attempt to look for nothing is to look into the gaps between thoughts, or between perceptions, or between periods of waking. For example, look into deep sleep. Look for all of the gaps in what you think is consciousness and become interested in these gaps. I talked about this in one of my previous talks. It was either on concentration or wisdom, and recently I was pleased to find this, almost this exact same teaching in this text called The Stanzas on the Recognition of Shiva, which is by Utpaladeva, who was a 10th century Kashmiri mystic. And he suggests this look into the gaps between thoughts and to gradually expand your awareness of those gaps. Now, he also gave another method, which is interesting to look at by contrast, because it's a sort of a positive method, or at least it appears to be at first, which is, he says, focus on not any concept, but what he describes as a pure concept, a concept that points directly toward the truth. And he gives something like, I am all that I see, I am this entire universe. This falls under the same category of teachings like to think about the thought, I am Brahman, the supreme reality, or even Nisargadatta's, the I am thought is still a focus on this thought or this sense, this sensation. And so it seems to be this positive method. But like Nisargadatta's teaching, Utpaladeva says, in the end, this pure concept itself will have to sort of self-destruct. So it is a doorway. It's a method, but that method itself will have to be transcended or self-destruct in the end. So I think all positive methods actually are like this. They are ultimately the same negative methodology, the same, you have to look for nothing. You have to go beyond all things is another way to say it positively. Go beyond all things. Because I would say, ultimately, there is only one destination. It actually isn't really nothing. And it isn't everything either. Those are just concepts. Even these concepts, even this look for nothing, is in a way like a pure concept, like what Utpaladeva is suggesting. And in the end, one needs to go beyond even that. It's beyond being and non-being, existence and non-existence. Any duality that you can think of, any distinction that you can think of, it's beyond that. Beyond, beyond, beyond. Only that non-dual truth, which is beyond distinction, all distinctions, can bring an end to this journey. And only then can one say, as Anandamayi did, this is such a wonderful statement, ever afterward, though the dance of creation changes around me in the hall of eternity, I shall be the same. So, with that, I'll open the floor to questions about nothing. I know it's a tall order. But if there are no questions, we could all just sit here and enjoy the nothing. But I welcome either case, so please.
I have a question based on the last observation of staying the same despite the world changing around you. And to me, I'm not sure if I'm seeing this too superficially or not, but it's always felt that way to me all my life. I mean, I see pictures of me as a toddler and a kindergartner, and I kind of remember, what it felt like to be at those different ages, but I don't feel like I've changed at all. I don't feel like anything's different, except for when I look in the mirror, I see my body has changed.
Right. Well, this is the dance of creation.
Yeah.
Changing in the halls of eternity.
Yeah. So there was always that string of, I guess, awareness. I'm not sure what you would call it, but that core center that never budges, it has the same taste and sound and feel, and it never takes a break. It's nice. Anyway, so
it is nice.
I don't know. I just was wondering. Well, that seems as clear as a bell. So, that? Am I just being not seeing it?
You are you are at the very least on the right track. See. I think we all have a sense of this.
Yeah.
And it's why we step out on the path. Because we all have an intuitive sense of what is unchanging, what is ever present, what is the same always. Mm-hmm. And, but what I would say for you is go back even further. See, you can imagine or think about or ponder your life when you were young, when you were, not to say that you're not young. That's an unfortunate way of putting it. When we were all, 10 or, 8 or 5 or 6 or 4. What's the earliest thing you can remember?
Me?
Yeah.
I remember a crib that I was placed in. It was painted yellow, and I remember once the doctor came, and that's probably a memory.
What was before that?
I don't. think I have memories before that.
Yeah, but don't think about your memory. Just follow the memory back to that
I
very
see.
first memory, and then ask yourself, what was before
I
that?
see that. I see nothing.
Aha, aha.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one more way of looking for nothing. These memories are like the doorway,
It's
like
like,
the
yeah,
pure concept leading you back to nothing.
yeah.
And this is the same teaching you find in Zen, where they say, what was your true face before you were born, or before your mother and father conceived you?
Yeah.
It is a teaching pointing directly to nothing. So that's the direction that I would say in your contemplation, in your practice, to look beyond all memories, follow that unchanging presence back beyond the scope of one's own manifest life.
And it helps to, I mean, because I've heard the question raised in the past, even my mother raised it, who were you before you were born and after you die? And it's like, who knows? But
You know.
but if you take it to just before like that earliest memory, and just
Yeah.
before that earliest memory, it's much more. It connects me more viscerally to
Yeah.
an experience of aliveness, even
Yes.
without any images attached, because there's no memories, no
That's right.
visuals, no.
And then if you get a sense of that, that's really good. Remind yourself that this memory is arising now in your
Right.
awareness right now. And that nothing that you perceive just beyond it is also right here, right now.
And that leads me to a practice question. You mentioned different ways of contemplating nothing. And one of the ways you mentioned very briefly, and I kind of said, oh, yeah, I like that, was that never letting your mind rest.
Yeah.
And I like that. I've been playing with that a bit because whenever a thought process comes up that I feel the stickiness, I just do a kind of a light little touch off of it and move along. And just like, oh yeah, and then move on. And it's really kind of fun to just bounce off of a thought that comes up that has, traditionally been a sticky thought for me.
Yeah.
And then there's this feeling when I do that of, now what should I think? Now,
You freed your mind up
yeah,
to think
yeah,
something
yeah.
else.
Oh, I want a new thought. Ooh, I can't think of anything. And sometimes I flounder, in these moments of, I don't know what to think. Oh my gosh, I got all this,
But that's a great observation.
yeah,
And I think that if you get a sense of this practice of just letting the mind move on,
Yeah.
of not letting it rest anywhere, you see the mind isn't the problem. It can go on by itself, no problem.
Oh, yeah.
And I also, this teaching is very interesting. I also recommend it for people who find themselves always trying to grasp the truth, trying to construct a view, to understand it. It's like this, it's like that, or this part fits on this part, and this is beyond that, and then that's emanating from that, and then the body, like to construct a whole kind of view. And this is just another kind of sticky thought where you're trying to, and so when these sticky thoughts come up, I like what you said, to just allow yourself to kind of bounce off of them and go on. This is, by the way, there's this great teaching in the Gospels that says Jesus encounters this a person who wants to join him. It says, I want to follow you and so on. And he says to him that birds have their nests and foxes have their dens, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Now, usually the interpretation of this has something to do with the fact that Jesus is homeless. He's wandering around from place to place. And this person, I think maybe he was somebody who had, some affluence or some money. And so the message is you're going to have to leave all that behind and so on. And I think there's an actually deeper message here of what you really have to leave behind is even bigger than just leaving behind your money or leaving behind your possessions. I like to think like if you think that the body is like the nest of a bird, and the mind is like the den of a fox. But where Jesus is pointing, you'll have nowhere to rest. No, the mind cannot rest anywhere. There's no place. As the author of The Cloud of Unknowing said, no place physically, no nest, no den is every place spiritually. And so by letting the mind go on, move on from place to place to place without settling anywhere, without making a nest, without digging a den that you will curl up inside of and become comfortable.
Without certainty of any sort.
Yes, with no certainty, with no, in a sense, security. And this is the cloud of unknowing. You don't know what's going to happen.
And it's nice because then you don't have to worry about anything.
Yes, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
That's the good news. That's the gospel, is that when you really do this, when you recognize it, there's a kind of security in it that's completely undreamt of. It's that nothing can assail, that nothing can go wrong, because it's like being your nest, so to speak, your den is the arms of God, is the universe itself.
And you are off the hook.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes. You're free.
Yeah. I used to be a school teacher for a few years, and I was really dedicated at planning. I was a very good planner. It burned me out pretty fast, but I planned every moment of the day for every student.
Wow.
And so, I always said equal hours planning to the hours in the classroom. But when I gave that up and I moved on and I got a job substitute teaching, which meant there was no planning because I had no idea what I was going to do or what age group or the kids or the names or the subjects or anything. And it was so wonderful. I decided I much preferred it because I was clueless every time I went to work. And everything always seemed to work out just fine. So it was like a little of a metaphor of that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that story, having worked in education 17 years and 7 years of that as a substitute teacher.
Yeah.
I also love that about substitute teaching. You just show up.
You show up and do your best and
show up and do your
kind
best.
of trust that everyone else is going to try to do their best and we'll be okay.
Yeah, it's a wonderful practice. And even, later on my path, I was still working in schools, but I was working as an EA. And trying to deal with myself, and I came up with this kind of self-teaching that was kind of like that, and maybe in part I got it from 7 years of substitute teaching, was this idea of just going into every situation, not knowing what was going to happen, and with just having a sense of kindness and curiosity to see what would unfold, and that this kind of practice freed me from so much kind of anxiety or trying to control situations or trying to control myself or the feelings or reactions of other people and so on, and just what was going to happen and so on. I just gave it all up and said, I'm just going to have this basic kindness and curiosity, and that's all I need. And I will see what's happened. Just be interested to see what unfolds.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your years of service as an educator. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I'm wondering if this is, Joel gave us this teaching a while back about when you're entering a situation that is kind of anxiety producing. I remember him saying, go as no one.
Yeah, this is very similar.
Yeah, so I just wondered, because when that thought arises and I actually allow that to be, then there is that kind of freedom that you're describing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's almost like an inherent trust.
Yeah.
Just that allowing of whatever arises.
And of letting go.
Yeah.
Letting go of, in a sense, responsibility. In a sense, a preference for outcomes or a regard for outcomes. I want this to happen, not that happen. I like this, I don't like that. I want this person to feel this way or to think this thing about me or whatever. You give all of that up.
Yeah.
And you just see what happens. You're not responsible for any of it.
Yeah.
And there's such a liberating freedom in that. And I would say a kindness and a curiosity. That, in a way, that's what's left when you go into something as nothing.
That's right. Yeah.
It's just this curiosity to just see how things unfold, what happens when you just allow things to happen.
Yeah, and then it's interesting as you're saying. I noticed that that even in saying go as nothing or go as no one, there is an attachment. There's like a little tiny subtle attachment for things to go quote unquote well. So anyway, it's an interesting thing. Like when you say when all of it can go and there's that allowing with curiosity and kindness, then it seems to make that stickiness disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, that even if it's a subtle desire for things to go well, that also has to be let go of.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it becomes a sticking point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if things don't go well, now you're stuck. Now
Exactly.
you got a problem.
Anyway, thank you for that. I just wanted
But
to
if you don't have that and things don't go well, you
don't even know they don't.
surprise you.
Yeah. Right. Whatever well is at that point.
That's the thing. I always tell my mom, it all works out in the end. Even when it doesn't work out, it works out. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Great comments. Go as nothing. Yeah, that's good. And thank you all for your presence, your curiosity, and your kindness. Until next time, peace to you all. Yeah. Thank you, Eva. Yeah.